Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
And a welcome to you all on a sunny March 30, 2023. Lots of news to talk about today, but I want to begin with a guest who I've been looking forward to talking to. She, like other people I have known in my life, grew up as the child of someone who had survived the horror of the Holocaust. To me, that is mind-blowingly incomprehensible to have one of your parents or both your parents survivors of that horror. And I've often talked about the impossibility of comprehending that horror. The magnitude of it is just paralyzing. It's like trying to think of, infinity. Your brain just freezes. But one person's story has the power to break through that paralysis, to break through to our hearts and to our heads. And my guest, Lee Goldman Kikel's father, Melvin Goldman, did something that very few survivors did. He sat down long before people were doing oral histories. He sat down by himself and over the course of months, talked his story into a tape recorder. So it is in his words and relatively fresh with detail. And it's an amazing, amazing story, as each story is. And his only daughter, Lee, after his death, compiled his recordings, transcribed his recordings, added to the perspective of his life in Pittsburgh, where he ended up. And what resulted is a book called Perseverance, One Holocaust Survivor's Journey from Poland to America. And I must say that it is through a National Endowment grant, National Endowment for the Humanities, for the Arts. It has been made into a stage production, which will have its world premiere at Prime Stage Theater on the Northside next month. So this story, Melvin Goldman's story that he talked into his tape recorder, is alive and well and testament to this particularly horrific chapter in human history. It's my pleasure to welcome Lee Goldman Kikel. Lee, hi.
Good morning, Lynn. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. You know, I had friends growing up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, whose parents were survivors. And I always thought, I couldn't imagine. I always sort of wondered if their reality, their internal reality was affected by that. Do you feel like your childhood was any different because of your father's history?
Actually, my growing up years were pretty good and pretty smooth. And I think because my father did not talk about it, it didn't really affect me. And I think it's affected me tremendously since I listened to those tapes in 2015, wrote the book, and now, we're working up to the play. It has deeply affected me constantly.
Doesn't it blow your mind that your dad went through what he went through? And we'll get to that in a second. And yet, to your mind, he was just daddy. He was this kind, good man.
Yes, and he masked it very well. He was positive and upbeat and pretty much never met a person he didn't like. He could talk to everybody. And yes, he was daddy, and we had good times playing soccer and going to the park and to the zoo. And I never realized the magnitude of what he went through and struggled every single day.
The fact that he did what he did, as I said, I think is very unusual. It's not unusual that Holocaust survivors didn't talk about it. But it is unusual that your dad knew that he needed to record his story.
Yes, I agree with you. I think that he felt his story needed to be preserved and that he was the only one that was going to be able to tell what happened to him and to all of the family. And I in the tapes, he did request someone put his story into a book, but he put those tapes away, continued to work, and he never got back to it for whatever reason.
You do the book, relatively chronologically, so we can follow just one person's story. He grew up in a very wonderful, large middle class family, and I don't know how to pronounce it. Is it Lodz? How's it pronounced in Poland?
Some people pronounce it Lodz. Some people pronounce it Łódź.
Oh, well, I'll say Lodz because I don't. It's a sizable city in Poland, and his father was a Pole. Lived in Poland all his life. In fact, was a decorated World War I veteran for service in the Polish army. So it's not as if the Jews in Poland, which was a sizable population of Jews, of the 6 million Jews killed in the Holocaust, almost half were Polish Jews. I believe.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
300 million Poles, 3.5 million Jews in Poland. Yes.
And they pretty much Hitler's dream was pretty much realized in Poland, even more than in Germany. But I think one of the things that blindsided a lot of Jews who lived in these countries is they had served they'd been taxpayers and lived in their towns and cities and served in the military, as your grandfather, who you will never have met, obviously, because he perished. So it was a relatively normal childhood, although your dad does point out that there was anti-Semitism. I mean, he says that you couldn't walk. A Jew couldn't walk on the sidewalk in front of a Catholic church. They had to cross the street, things like that. And, you'd hear occasional pogroms in this village or where Jews just got, beat up or killed. But mostly he felt like he had a normal childhood.
Yes, the anti-Semitism that he felt was at school, some of the kids, and when they played soccer, some of the kids that were not Jewish, they picked on them or they beat them up. But basically, they just, like you said, it was the second largest city in Poland at the time. They were living their lives. My grandfather owned a sheet metal factory, and my dad was becoming an apprentice. They vacationed, they celebrated, they lived a fairly normal life.
And then the Germans came.
that's it. September of 39, the Nazis came in, and the city of Łódź, they made the ghetto, and the Goldman family, their street was incorporated into the ghetto, and they remained there until summer of 44, all of them together, until the ghetto was being liquidated.
So it is amazing. So May 1, 1940, the Germans sealed it off. Barbed wire couldn't go within 50. The Jews, all the Jews, there were 150,000 Jews in this city, this large city, and they were, forced into a rather small area. And the horrors inside that ghetto that ensued in the next 2.5, 3 years are so appalling. You can't even. I mean, just appalling.
Yes, harsh winters. They were all forced to work if they could. My grandfather was a supervisor in a metal factory. My father was working in a metal factory, and he eventually became one of the youngest instructors there. My grandmother was forced to work as well. She made straw forms that the Nazis put in their boots to prevent frostbite. And by that time, she was in very ill health, from what my father describes. So most of them, if you could work, you were forced to work.
And people died. People died of starvation. People died of want. People died. It was enough of a horror. Your dad is, I believe, about 16 when they're sealed into the ghetto.
Yes.
Yeah. And I want to read some of his words. I mean, the fact that he just spoke this out. I've read a lot of Holocaust literature, but your father's voice was particularly, powerful to me. Because it's so unedited. It's just like someone just talking. It's not somebody thinking to write this down just right. He's just talking to the reader. And he says at one point, can you realize what it is to live every day with fear and with these sufferings and thoughts for 5 years? The beast did a good job. Not only did they murder 6 million Jews and about 25 million other human beings, but even the ones, and he's speaking of himself here, who survived, each and every one had something done to him or her physically or mentally or both that until they die, they will never forget. They will remember it every day. I still try to live with myself now, so many years later. And yet, he didn't show that to you. This is the part of what, the courage, the sort of, again, perseverance. It's a word that he used a lot, right?
Yes.
Required to live his life and not afflict his child, his only child, with it.
It's amazing. And it's interesting that you picked that part to read, because that is a part that I read when I give my presentation. And I find that to be so powerful. And to just try to wrap my head around the fact that he did live with that every single day and never showed it. And I remember as a kid, my dad had nightmares. He would be yelling out in the night, and I had no idea what that was about. And he just went along every single day, and he worked, and he did what he had to do and never complained.
The time came when, as you mentioned, the Nazis decided to put an end to all the Jews in this huge ghetto. And they, as we know, they were loaded into cattle cars and sent off to certain death. And your father speaks of being in the cattle. One of the amazing things is that he had how many siblings? I mean, there were like 6 other siblings.
Yes, six other siblings.
And the family, his mom, his dad, and them were together and stayed together and were alive together up until they were shoved into that cattle car for the trip to Auschwitz, which in and of itself is amazing.
It is. And I know that they were all in pretty bad shape by that point. My father describes his dad saying to my grandmother, just hang in, everything will be okay. And he was giving her memories of some vacations that they had taken together, trying to get her mind off of how bad things really were. And they had no idea where they were going and what was going to happen to them.
You know, it's what you just said, when he talks about the fact of being crammed into that cattle car with all those other terrified people, no place to take care of one's business, no food unless you manage to have a little bit of bread, days heading to you did not know what, you feared you knew, and he remembers his dad talking to your mom and using her the familiar name when he's being, when he's loving her, calling her by her whatever that special name was for her, and saying, trying so hard. Can you imagine his fear, but trying to make her, you remember that time we went, I'm trying to imagine when I think of inside a cattle car, because I have in my life, I can't imagine a sweet, loving moment like that. It just touched me so. And when they got off that car, that was it. That was the last time your dad ever saw them again and his siblings, except for one brother. They
That's
were all
correct. Yep,
all
they were separated.
Exterminated. Yeah.
That's
they were
right.
Okay. So people know of the horrors. To hear your dad's account, it's the winter, and they're barefoot and marching and walking, and they've got no winter coats, and they're being fed 300 calories a day, and that anybody survived is beyond. And they were beaten, and that anyone survived is mind blowing. And by the time he was rescued, he was more dead than alive, like so many were. And he was rescued by the Americans, the 82nd Airborne. And even those that were so-called liberated that day by the Americans, most of them still died. They were that gone. He said they were put in a hangar. Of the 300 people in the hangar, only 75 survived. And that was with care and food they were given.
That's correct. I was going to say at Liberation, he weighed about 80 pounds. He described himself as being a skeleton, and he had a collapsed lung, and they found that he had active tuberculosis. So they started to treat him right away. But as you said, most of those that were found that day, they perished.
They still didn't make it. Can you imagine making it, seeing your liberators come and then dying. And that happened to so many. And he also, because his feet were horribly frostbitten, he lost some of his toes. He was grievously injured. And so he was cared for in various different places. I mean, I can't, the fact is, it's not like, oh, they get liberated and then they go off to, some welcoming country. No, a whole other chapter starts of unbelievable suffering and, I guess, working through all the emotions. He went through a lot of rage, and who can blame him? He carried rage.
He did. He did. And just the fact to be in rehab facilities, it was almost 5 years. It took him 5 years to feel good enough and to have training throughout that time to be able to say, I'm going to get myself going, pick myself back up, and try to say, I'm a productive member of society, and now I can leave this country.
And he wanted to leave. The thought of going back to Poland was absolutely something he couldn't even comprehend.
No, he refused. He to go back to Poland, and he was in Germany, and he realized he had a few choices, and the choice that made the most sense to him was coming to the United States. He thought that it would be welcoming, and he would no longer be stateless.
And yet he had to go through so much. I mean, and again, this is one story, one soul's story. And he talked about looking at possible countries to go to and having to go to all these agencies to this and that. And he said Canada he looked at, but they only wanted certain people like tailors and shoemakers. Australia had a quota system. The United States had a hell of a quota system. And he says this, it's strange how all the countries made up rules. Really, it's humorous sometimes. After being imprisoned for 5 years by the Nazis, you had, and imprisoned is a word I mean more than imprisoned, brutalized, terrorized for 5 years by the Nazis. You had to go through a commission of about 15 doctors and take tests in order to see if you're fit to be accepted in a particular country. It was ironic that in order to be accepted, we had to have a trade and be healthy and happy. All this after surviving the Holocaust. I wondered, were these other countries full of perfect specimens themselves? Incredible.
My dad was very insightful. Yes. And as you said, he had to prove that he could be a productive member of society in order to leave and start his life again.
He had some family in Argentina, people who had gotten out before the Holocaust and had run to Argentina, as some Jews had. Of course, Argentina is where a bunch of friggin' Nazis went as well after the war. Argentina happily took them in. And he went to apply at the Argentinian consul. And he had to go 6, 7 times. And they kept asking him, they asked him, are you Catholic? And he said, no, I'm not a Catholic. I'm a Jew. And one of the officials, who he figures had compassion, said to him, don't say you're a Jew. Say you're a Catholic. And then when you get there, just do what you want. And your father got livid. I think he said, I said, forget it. After what I went through, I am not selling out. I was enraged. He was, after everything he had suffered as a Jew, he was told if he wanted to survive, he had to pretend not to be a Jew. You
captured it. Yes, he was absolutely adamant And he always said he was a proud Jew, and nobody could take that away from him. And he did have family that got to Argentina, as you said. It was my grandmother's sister. And when she found out that my dad was alive, they corresponded. And a couple of the photos that my father got of his family, that they were preserved because of her getting those photos from my grandmother in the early 1930s. But yes, my dad said, no, I'm going somewhere where I'm going to be accepted.
He came here, and it's not unusual that he became an extremely grateful, patriotic American who believed in the American dream.
He felt, I think almost the minute he stepped off the boat, that he was accepted here, and he spent 5 years. Well, he didn't know a word of English. He learned English. He started to work, and the thing that he wanted to do most was become a citizen. And so 5 years after he was here in 1956, he became a citizen. And I quote him, he said it was one of the best days of his life. He felt welcomed. He appreciated being here, and read and learned as much about the United States as he possibly could.
I was blown away by, he took a lot of jobs, door-to-door salesman, this, anything to, what he had to do. I was blown away that his shop that he ended up with his own business. The picture in the book that shows, the Manor Theater on Murray Avenue, and that he was up on the on the second floor, like over Silky's, right? Is that where it was?
Yeah. He was up on the second floor. It was Darlington Road, and you entered on Darlington Road, and you went up about 22 or 23 steps to get up to the second floor. And if you looked out my dad's office window, the marquee for the Manor Theater was right there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And he was a jewelry maker and seller, and right? It was called the Lee Trading Company?
Lee Trading Company, and then it became G&S Jewelry. And my dad started out selling costume jewelry and all kinds of giftware. And he decided he was so creative and so artistic. He took correspondence courses through the Gemological Institute of America. And so he learned how to set stones and how to categorize various stones. He was an expert in gems. He took diamond courses, semi-precious and precious stones. Like I said, he learned how to set various pieces of jewelry, and then he started to create things for people. So he specialized in engagement rings and wedding bands, but he also, if someone came in with a request, he would do the best he could to make whatever he could. Someone requested a totem pole be made into a necklace, and my dad did not know what a totem pole was. So he walked up to the library and he went to the children's section to find a picture book to see what a totem pole looked like. And then he designed a totem pole for this customer. And my other is somebody that worked for the city of Pittsburgh that drove a garbage truck. His wife wanted a garbage truck that she could wear as I am not. And so my father said, I'll draw this up. And he put rubies in the headlights and diamonds, and it had headlights, taillights. He was very, very creative.
Oh, God.
As my son Jason says, he thinks that my dad really wanted to make people happy, and he did it through his work.
Yeah. I have to tell you, powerful stuff. What would your dad think that his story ends up as a staged production And by the way, guys, that's again that's Prime Theater at the new Hazlitt Theater, and it's what April. The dates April 15 and 16.
Correct. I think my dad would be so blown away by all of this.
I'm sure.
Much as a people person, he stayed out of the limelight, and I think he would be grateful and extremely humbled by all of this. And everyone at Prime Stage has been so kind to me and to my family. And, we're just as grateful and honored that this is happening.
Well, if you want tickets, primestage.com. And also it will, you're going to be streaming it later. Where would it be streamed? On, what's the site?
Yes, through the website, you'll be able to stream the play April 24th to, I think, May 7th. And then
great.
Okay. Yeah, and then in the fall, it's going to be streamed again. There's an educational component called the Engage program, and they're going to have this go globally. So it's very exciting.
How wonderful! How wonderful! I found it hard going to read. I often was moved to tears. I'm almost crying now just thinking about him. And I just want to say, Lee, he would be so proud of what you've done and what a tribute to your dad. And I was thinking of, the Jewish prayer that we say when someone has died, may his memory be a blessing. And there is no doubt that your father's memory is a blessing and will be for a long, long time. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lynn. You captured everything beautifully, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate all the work that you put into doing this. And there's a lot we didn't get to. His efforts to get some measure of restitution for all his family. I think, it doesn't matter. There's just so much. But as I said, one person's story can touch you where the enormity loses you. So, perseverance. Where can people get the book?
People can get the book directly from my website. And there are independent bookstores, Riverstone, places locally. Pinskers has it as well. You can just look on my website, and I have a list of places where you can get the book, and I can sign copies. Yeah.
And it's that's leekikel.com. That's LEEKIKEL.
Lee at Lee. Yes, Lee at leekikel.com.
Oh, Lee at leekikel.com. Okay.
That's
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lee.
Have a wonderful day.
Have a wonderful day yourself. Happy Passover coming up, and thank you.
You too. Thank you, Lynn.
Okay. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, guys, I'm sorry. I was afraid I was going to lose it. I have to spend that much time with one person's voice in your head. Wow. Anyway. So how odd, changing the subject, that yesterday, right? Who was it? I forget who texted during the show. There's a live shooter at Laurel Highlands, and I noted that, and then came back and said, never mind. And then I got a little upset because I so don't like disseminating false information. But geez, it turns out I was just one of about 100,000. I mean, that thing was out there because it was, as we now know, more than Laurel Highlands. It was Central Catholic and Oakland Catholic and Hopewell, and it just unbelievable. And after the show, I don't get out a lot now, but I did have some things I was going to try to do. I had to go to the drugstore and I had to go to the bank. And so I went to the drugstore and then I went off to the bank, which took me to Fifth Avenue. And I headed toward Oakland. And I drove right into it. I saw all of the, my God, I couldn't believe it. The police presence. I couldn't believe it, but yeah. So that's when it all started, and all the people I could see, you know, they were parents. They couldn't get. I was stuck in a traffic jam. I was desperately trying. I never got to the bank. Wow. I, like so many others, hope to hell they find the SOB or Bs that did this. And I hope they put them away for a very long time. So we all now know a new verb, swatting. This is swatting, where you can, just with a touch of a button, terrorize and paralyze neighborhoods, communities, terrorize children and parents and teachers, take the entire emergency response professionals in a city and send them on wild goose chases, which they have to treat, even if they suspect it's a hoax, have to treat as if it is real. There's a special place in hell for the person who did this. And please, please let them be found and made an example of. And if the laws on the books now are not adequate to making swatting a bigger crime than I suspect it might be, then let's get to work making sure our legislators or the Congress make sure that, because this will spread like a contagion. And it turns out, you know, as we learned about it, that, yeah, oh, heck, there's lots of, this has been happening, my God, just the other day in Ohio. And then, yeah, so, you know, it's not like a story like this makes the national news. Maybe if a few people had been blown away, yes, or dropped dead of heart attacks, I guess. I don't know. It's our country now. And I want to say this. I see there's a story in the New York Times today, front page, which enrages me. Doesn't surprise me, but enrages me. And the headline is this: a shared shrug at gun control in Washington. They are not going to do a thing. Now, the president has said he can't, and he's right. I've done everything that I unilaterally can. I'm an executive, but I deal with this. There's a legislative branch. This is their purview. Only they can do something. And listen to, this is a congressman from Tennessee after this latest slaughter in his home state. And he flat out said on the steps of the Capitol, hours after 6 innocent people are blown away, we're not going to fix it. That's what he said. Representative Tim Burchett. We are not going to fix it. And in case you didn't understand, he goes on to say criminals are going to be criminals. He said Congress doesn't have any real role to play, and he suggested that the answer is parents should just homeschool their children. Do you believe that? Do you believe that? And this guy, I suppose, will get reelected. Yeah. This is why, my guest yesterday saying, don't freak, just organize, call these people and, get active so that we get these SOBs out. Get them out. We're not going to do anything. We're not going to fix it. No. We'll just let children be terrorized every day as they go to school, and parents fearful that their children might not come back. Yeah, that's the American way. I was blown away by this one woman. I don't know. Who, when she heard there was an active shooter at Central Catholic, and she has a son there, she was so freaked out. Here's what she said. The teacher I was talking to was hysterically crying. I kicked my neighbor's door in. This is what one Pittsburgh mother did. I kicked my neighbor's door in and took their car keys because I don't have my own car. Well, hey, I saw some good news. It's sort of wonderful news. You know how despicable DeSantis wanted to punish Disney because Disney had the gall to criticize the education, the bill that DeSantis backed, what's now being called the Don't Say Gay bill, is totally homophobic and discriminatory crapple, culture war bullshit playing to his base, that DeSantis signed into law last year, and Disney came out and, said something negative. And DeSantis, quite clearly, taking, again, this is what these guys do, like Trump, vengeful, retaliate. You criticize me? Well, what he did, as you know, he did a lot of things, but one of the things he did is there is an oversight board that Disney has had to deal with from day one, which is responsible for all the infrastructure projects that maintains other aspects of the park, whatever. DeSantis, goes at the board and takes every member of it off and replaces all of them with his own appointees. Religious, homophobic right-wingers, bent on vengeance. And the board, this new board of his, well, they've been there for what? Almost a year. Guess what this board of idiots that DeSantis appointed just found out? They found out that literally the day before, the DeSantis and his crowd paved the way for him to do this. The board that was, knowing it was going to be blown up and reconstituted with vengeful DeSantis acolytes, that board signed an agreement transferring almost all of its powers to Disney. So this new board came in. They think they've got power. They just found out they don't. What now? Of course, DeSantis and his crowd are going berserk, and they're saying they're going to court, that this can't be legal. But I don't know. I don't know. The agreement actually says, wait, where can I find this? A copy of the agreement says that it has what's called listen to this. This is so bizarre. Has a so-called royal lives clause. That, man, this must go back to, the Magna friggin' Carta. And it says, it is this law, this agreement that they made, giving Disney all the power that DeSantis thought he had, is valid in perpetuity. Or if in perpetuity doesn't float your boat, until and this is the quote, until the death of the last survivor of the descendants of King Charles III, the King of England, who is living as of the date of this declaration. So until every last descendant of King Charles now is dead, this Disney has the power. And so we'll see. And we'll see. I love it, though. Do you not love that? Disney behind, they knew it was coming. They did an end run, and I love it. And these fascists, these Christian nationalist fascists like to do things to own the liberals, right? Well, I think the liberals, and not even the liberals, Disney, I don't think Disney is liberal. The other side, and Disney's with us on this, owned the Christian nationalist fascists. I love it. Love it. I've got two things that just blew me away. Both are stories from the UK. And again, it's stories that make you think, geez, a lot of the pride that I took in my country and being an American was that I really did feel that America in many ways typified what can happen when you don't have a nationalistic enterprise, when you are, in fact, an ingatherer of all kinds of peoples, and you create, a democracy. I know, they can say, well, that didn't work too well for this one and that one. Yeah, I know. But the idea of it, so superior to so many other nations. But the more I look, and even like just talking earlier in the show with Lee Kikel, talking about her father having gone through all this holy hell, unimaginable brutality and human, depravity, he comes to this country and feels like he's in a golden land. He can't believe it because of what he knew governments were capable of. And people, your neighbors, were capable of. And so he believed in the American dream and he lived it. Well, we learned that a lot of Americans are sure having a lot of trouble accessing that dream now, and it's because we say one thing and we sort of do another. We do not help people get ahead. We help rich people get more. And we do not welcome those unlike ourselves. We got a whole bunch of Americans who believe we should be building walls. So I was just blown away to see that Scotland, you may recall that the longstanding head of Scotland, they're called the First Minister, not the Prime Minister. This woman, Nicola Sturgeon, who's bent on pulling Scotland out of the UK and being an independent nation, she decided she fought the good fight and was retiring. Now, I believe she's still in, but she's about to, I guess that's about to happen. And so her party, it's whoever heads that party that becomes the first minister, because they control most of the parliament. And did you see who they picked as their new head, who will soon be the new head of Scotland? Let me just tell you his name first. Humza Yousaf. Not exactly a Scottish name, is it? Humza Yousaf. He's 37 years old. That's the other thing other countries do. They let young people take over and lead. 37-year-old Humza Yousaf, who is a Muslim in an overwhelmingly Christian country, will be the head of that country. Now, I have to say to you, that would not happen here. So all these things that I always thought of, well, America is special because we can elect. I mean, in my lifetime, we elected a black man named Barack Obama. And we called him a Muslim so people wouldn't vote for him. But here's a guy. Unbelievable. He's living the Scottish dream. It's not just an American dream. And in other countries, upward mobility is it's happening more than it happens here now. He will be the first Muslim to be elected as a national leader in any Western democracy. And stop and think. Who's Britain's prime minister right now? Huh? You know? They've been changing a lot. His name is Rishi Sunak. The English prime minister is named Rishi Sunak, and he is a Hindu in an overly Christian nation. So Americans can get off the bloviating, step down from the podium, please. We are now no longer living like other countries are living this idea of what we were supposedly about. We were supposedly a meritocracy where anyone, regardless of, right? Blah, 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 blah. So there you have it. The UK. I'm blown away by it. I really am. I'm blown away. I love it. And here's something in another part of the UK that I also wanted to bring to your attention because it too is something that America would never do. We would think this is insanity. The Irish, turns out, are doing a pilot program that there's actually in Ireland bipartisan support for, which amounts to giving money, giving actually about, I'm not going to talk euros, I'll talk dollars. They are giving $18,200 a year to 2,000 artists. Regular, ordinary artists. Now, they let out that they were going to do this program, and so people who they said work in the visual arts, in theater, in literature, music, dance, opera, movies, circuses, and architecture were free to apply. And it was said that 2,000 would just be, pulled out of a hat, and they would be given 18,000 plus a year so that they could work at their passion instead of having to hold down, a day job, and then when they got home and were exhausted, could work at their passion, which is what artists generally do, which is why we have starving artists, right? And they're about a year into this, I guess. They're doing it very carefully so that they have another group of artists who aren't getting it. They're going to be looking at the differences made in whatever impact it has. The payments, they come in weekly installments, are meant to, cover things like rent and bills and just lower the anxiety of people who are living, hand to mouth, because their passion is to create art. Now, in America, I can't even begin. We won't even give money to people who are starving and working 3 jobs. And this is all part of something that is growing all over the world, which is an interest in what is called a universal basic income. When a government, and believe me, this is not considered crazy in a lot of places. The Irish are not nuts, okay? They believe that when governments pay their citizens, whether these people are employed or not, a lump sum each month, that it will, over time, ensure that a nation's people are healthier, are happier, and that this works better than other, like welfare. Just give everybody a certain amount of money. Of course, Americans would almost universally say, what? What? But as I said, in Ireland, it says cross-party support, bipartisan support, lest you think it's a bunch of lunatics. Believe it or not, libertarians tend to support it. Anti-poverty groups certainly do. Lefties do. But a growing number of people are, and there you have it. I just, we need to pay attention. Americans always think that whatever we do is like the way things are done. There's all kinds of ways of looking and dealing with problems. Unfortunately, we tend to look at them and react harshly, punitively, ungenerously. And it's just wonderful to see that where we're falling short, that other nations are stepping up. So I wanted to leave you with that because I think that is some hopeful news. All right, that's it for me for this week, guys. Thank you so much for spending any of your time with me. And I hope you all have a really good weekend because mine starts now.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.